Hey friends, welcome back to another Seed Talk podcast episode with Lisa and Layne. Hey Layne.
Hello.
So friends, we're glad to have you here today. We are in midsummer, and so we are in high growing season, and Layne has picked a great crop for us to talk about today. But before we jump in, if you are new here, or if you're not familiar with us, you are invited to head over to thegardenersworkshop.com, where you'll find just some in-depth stuff for you to mess around in, from free resources to a packed library of our online courses, our online garden shop that is fully stocked with the same tools, seeds, and supplies you hear Layne and I mention on the podcast from time to time. And there's just a lot of great stuff over there. So you are invited. And Layne always asks you all to subscribe and post reviews because, friends, that just helps more people find us. And we appreciate and thank each one of you that have already done that. So, Layne, what exactly are we talking about today?
Well, it's July, and believe it or not, July is a time when some people might already need to start sowing some of their cool flower seeds. So a lot of people are wondering, what warm season seeds can I sow now that might bloom before my first frost? So today we're going to be talking about zinnias, and we're going to specifically be comparing some different zinnia varieties, some of the most common, to help you maybe pick which ones you might want to grow, because zinnias are a relatively fast crop. Everything we're going to talk about today blooms in around 75 to 90 days. So this is a good one to try to squeeze in another warm season crop depending on where you live.
Yeah, I totally agree. And nobody appreciates a fresh crop of zinnias more than I do, particularly late summer, heading into fall. Great colors, great idea.
Yes. Okay, so for planning when to start your seeds, we always talk about needing to know your last expected frost date in the spring and your first expected frost date in the fall based on historical averages.
Yeah.
And for these later season plantings, we really need to pay attention to that fall frost date. So based on your frost date in the fall, Lisa, when is it too late to sow zinnia seeds?
So as you mentioned, most zinnias bloom from seed to bloom. It normally takes 75 to 90 days. Definitely your growing conditions can affect that.
Yes.
So you want to allow at least 90 days. And I like to tack on some extra days so you actually have time to reap the benefit of what you're growing, right? So that is the real card that you need to play is, how long does it take it to bloom? Okay, how long till my frost? And just simply do the math.
Yeah. And it's also a good idea, like you said, to tack on some extra time, just because as we start heading into fall, the weather starts cooling down. And so sometimes these warm season crops don't grow quite as quickly as they might in the middle of summer.
Good point. And the days are getting shorter, and that slows things down also.
Okay, we're going to start our comparison. So the first variety we're going to start with is kind of the gold standard, the classic cut flower zinnia. And this is going to be Benary's Giants. These are really large blooms. They can be anywhere from 3 to 6 inches across. The plants get quite tall, 3 to 4 feet. And again, 75 to 90 days to bloom. And these are open pollinated. So why are these the classic cut flower go-to zinnia?
So we love this zinnia. It is the most commercially grown, and it is because of many of the things you just mentioned. It has long, straight stems. The blooms are big and voluptuous. It has a high percentage of doubles, meaning more than one row of petals. It actually has multiple rows of petals. And it just has a large color selection to choose from.
Yeah. And these are some of the colors. I'm just going to read them out to you. And they're solid colors, which is different than some of the other zinnias we'll talk about today. White, bright pink, carmine, wine, deep red, scarlet, coral, salmon rose, orange, golden yellow, lime, purple, and lilac. So there's a color for everyone in there, right, Lisa?
There is. And if you're listening to this on a podcast, you need to pop on over to YouTube, because Layne has a beautiful slideshow going. And I just love that pinwheel image you are showing that shows so many of the beautiful colors.
Yes.
They're gorgeous.
And which colors do you particularly like to sow for these later plantings that might be blooming closer to fall?
Sure. So really, Bobo and I just had this discussion yesterday because we've just started some more zinnias. And we basically would start any of them, but we would steer away from the bright pink, which is kind of like a baby pink, right? That's not a hot fall color, unless, of course, you're having your little girl baby shower.
Yeah.
And really any of the other colors, but we go really hard on the deep red, the wine, the lime green, the yellow and the orange and the red, those kind of southwestern type colors.
Yes. And you already kind of mentioned this, but Benary's Giants do have a really high percentage of doubles compared to singles. Do you typically see a lot of singles? How many do you see?
It's rare in the Benary's Giants, but some colors like yellow probably has, and I'm just thinking the yellows probably, and maybe the whites. And they still don't have many, but you'll occasionally see those. But the latest introductions, which would be wine and deep red, and I think carmine, those three, you just never see singles,
Yeah.
because they were the latest introduction, which means their breeding is kind of fresh. You know what I mean? They haven't been diluted, and they are just absolutely beautiful.
They really are. I love those colors so much. So how productive would you say these plants are? And we're going to use this to compare to some of the zinnias that are coming later on in this episode.
Sure. So, we grow a lot of zinnias because that is our customer's number one pick. It's the number one seed we sell most often, as well as it was in our top 10 for cash crops when we were in production. So the Benary's Giants are perhaps one of the most productive in my experience, and that's one of the reasons that commercial growers grow it. It is nothing to get, 5 to 12 good, nice blooms off of each plant.
Yeah.
And that just makes them really in demand, and they will continue to produce, but sometimes as the plant ages, the blooms maybe won't get as big or as voluptuous. So that's why we kind of succession plant them. But they're incredibly productive.
So powdery mildew is a problem that affects pretty much all zinnias. Would you say this variety has more or less resistance to it, or is it just the same as all the other zinnias?
Definitely more resistance. It is one of the most mildew resistant varieties. All zinnias do get mildew, but this is one resists it as long as possible. I would say they tend to, and it doesn't move through them quite as quickly when they get it. So it has a higher resistance to mildew.
All right. And then are the Benary's Giants, would you say this cultivar is the one that you grew the most of in terms of zinnias on the farm?
Oh, yeah. So I would say zinnias were probably 15 to 20% of what we grew overall on our farm. And of those, Benary's Giants are probably 95% for sure.
Yeah. Okay, now let's move on to another one that is kind of similar to the Giants. And we actually have had an entire episode on this, which was our first episode of the year, which was the Pantone color of the year. And it is on Uproar Rose. And that's episode 18, by the way, if you want to go back and listen to that. Uproar Rose has really big blooms, also 3 to 5 inches. The plants are somewhere around 32 to 36 inches tall, 75 to 85 days to bloom. And we've mentioned before, this is a really expensive seed because it is a hybrid, but these plants are really productive and uniform. And the flowers of Uproar Rose are this gorgeous, vivid rose color that just seems to glow out there in the garden.
Yes, the color is incredible. It's like a magenta color. It is incredibly productive, and it's high germination on the seeds. And while it is more expensive, we found it, as you can see from the image that Layne is showing, we would typically grow, 50 to 100-foot beds of these because the color just all summer long, it makes every other flower pop.
Yeah. Is this a color you would grow for fall?
Yes, for sure.
And do you tend to see any singles with this versus the doubles, or is this just a really uniform double most of the time?
Nope, it's a very uniform, lots of rows of petals, super. I mean, you can look at the image and just look at the sides of the flowers and just see how many layers of petals are there. So yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah, the flowers are very fully petaled. And
Yes.
we've already mentioned that the plants are really productive. Would you say they're about the same as the giants or more?
Maybe a little bit more.
And how about disease resistance?
Yes. So fairly, I mean, I would probably put them up there with Benary's giants as far as mildew resistance.
And how much of this would you plant compared to any of the single colors of Benary's giants?
Probably equivalent to what a single color would be in Benary's giants. So, I mean, we would grow entire 120-foot beds of individual Benary's giant colors. An uproar, maybe not a full bed just because of the cost of the seed, but probably half a bed.
Okay, now we're going to move on to some smaller flowers. So this is the Oklahoma series. These are really cute, more petite blooms, 1.5 to 2.5 inches across. The plants are around 36 inches tall, 75 to 90 days to bloom, and these are open pollinated. So what do you love about these Oklahomas, Lisa?
Oh, love Oklahomas. They're actually the zinnia that I love having on my kitchen table.
Yes.
And it's because they're just smaller and they just add. So it's so nice to have them to add to bouquets along with the big zinnias for variation in texture, colors, and size. But totally love these little zinnias, and I love them in all colors.
Yeah.
There's the mix just has some great colors in it.
Yes, you can definitely get a mix, and some of the colors in there are white, ivory, pink, carmine, scarlet, salmon, and golden yellow. So would you typically just plant the mix if you were planting for fall, or would you try to pick some of the individual colors?
I think the mix is really the go-to because first off, there's two colors of yellow that I see happening in the mix, and one of them is the golden yellow, which is really
Yes.
perfect for fall. So yeah, no, I would definitely go with the mix. And they are very productive, nice little flowers.
Yes, I think the smaller flowers are so cute,
Yeah.
and their smaller size makes them really easy to work into different designs. So how often do you see single flowers versus doubles or semi-doubles?
Interestingly enough, these come from Benary's also, and they do have a high rate of doubles. There is the occasional single, but there's definitely more doubles than there are singles.
And how productive would you say these plants are compared to the giants?
I mean, if you ask Bobo, she'll tell you they're highly productive because she's the one that cuts those. And, you just really learn about a flower. When you're the person that cuts that flower bed from week to week to see how it really replenishes. And the Oklahomas are really productive. That's why you don't need much.
Yeah. And then how about disease resistance?
They're about the same. They might be a little bit more susceptible to mildew than some of the others. But they do pretty well, actually.
How many Oklahoma zinnias would you grow on the farm compared to the giants?
So the giants, as I mentioned earlier, are like 95% of what we grow. Of that other 5%, and the uproars kind of go in with the Benary's giants. The other 5% would be a mix of these Oklahomas. So probably 1% of what we grow overall, because you don't need much because they are so productive.
And why is that you would grow less of these Oklahomas than of the giants? Is it because the smaller flowers can't command the same price per stem as the larger flowers?
The perceived value is perceived lower because it's a smaller flower. However, it takes all the same steps. So when I was, I used to grow actually the scarlet Oklahoma, the small red one, for Colonial Williamsburg, because the president's wife, Miss Campbell, had because they have their homes are on tour all the time, right? And she had one particular room that red flowers looks absolutely beautiful in. And so the minute I had red zinnias, the Oklahomas, which was her preference, she would have them every week in that room. So because the perceived value was lower, like for instance, when we were selling them commercially, I would put 15 stems of the Benary's Oklahomas in a bunch and sell it for the same price as 10 stems of the Benary's giants. You know what I mean? So that the price is the same, but the head size of the bunch seemed similar. And so those were ways we combated it. They were just more work for that reason. So you didn't command a price, but we found them essential to our mixed bouquet program. Suzanne loved having them for our bouquet subscriptions and our members only market customers. So we felt they were needed. We just didn't need as many of them.
Yeah. So you just got a lower price per stem essentially, but it was the same amount of work to get that stem.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, now we're moving on to a really, really beautiful batch of zinnias here. And this is the Queen, or sometimes you'll hear it referred to as the Queeny series. These have blooms kind of in between the size of the Oklahomas we just talked about and the Giants we talked about at first. They're 2 to 3.5 inches across, around 28 to 36 inches tall, 75 to 85 days to bloom. And these are also open pollinated. And these have really unique, beautiful, soft ombre tones. There are a couple of solid colors in there too, pure orange and lime, but I really love these ombre tones. There's queen lime blush, also known as queen lime blotch, queen lime red, queen lime orange, queen lemon peach, and they all have these undertones of a lime green or lemon shade combined with these smoky, dusty pinks and raspberries and apricots. And oftentimes the center of the flower is a rosy pink color. They are just stunning. What do you love about these, Lisa?
Well, they are particularly beautiful this year. And I will tell you that because Bobo and I were just staring at them earlier today, we have some downstairs that are 8 days old.
Oh,
which is really unheard of in zinnias
wow.
at this time of the year in a rainy season, just meaning they typically have disease issues, which just can affect their vase life. So Bobo and I have said, we believe that this is the best year we've ever had with queens. And it's their color palette. Queens are made for fall. I mean,
Yes.
the colors are just rich. And I mean, the lime blotch, I think, is one of my favorites. And it's kind of the way that the bloom looks, the way the color is on it that makes it so very, very beautiful. And so I have grown the solid colors and I've grown the mix. I really love the mix. I mean, although the lemon peach is drop dead gorgeous.
Oh, yes.
It's really unique in its color. So we just love them because of their palette.
Yeah. So any of these colors are really great for fall, essentially.
Yes.
And do you notice more singles with this compared to the Giants?
Oh, yeah. So particularly the red, is that what they call it? Red?
Queen lime red.
Yeah. The red I see, and then you can even look in this image, some of the lime blotches, which are the pink ones with lime around the edges. There are some that are single, but then there are some that aren't. So yes, it varies. There's a higher rate of single blooms in the Queen series than there are in the Benaries, for sure.
And if you were trying to sell those stems commercially, would they have any less value?
Not particularly. I mean, as long as they're good quality and at the right harvest stage. And again, I might put 15 of these in a bunch instead of 10,
Right.
because you have to think of it from a business person's perspective. Yes, they're beautiful color and yes, they're unique and different, but it's all about perceived value. And so yeah, they're pretty dadgum gorgeous.
They really are. The color palette is so sophisticated and multidimensional. And this ombre coloration really helps them blend and tie together different colors in an arrangement.
Yeah.
And you can just picture how perfect these would be for wedding work as well.
Oh yeah, for sure.
How productive would you say these plants are compared to the Giants?
They are pretty productive, actually. I mean, I think any zinnia, most zinnias, if you cut them twice a week like we do, maybe some are a little bit more than others, but these are fairly productive.
Yeah. And how about disease resistance with the queens?
Oh, I mean, we already have mildew this year, but on all of our zinnias because of the season that we're having. And I would say that they're a little resistant, but they get mildew. There's no question about it.
How many of the queens would you grow compared to how many Giants?
Probably 1%. So we kind of call these all of the 5% that I mentioned that we grow of other zinnias are kind of like our novelty zinnias. There
Right.
were customers that really loved them or really wanted them. And every now and then, every customer would want them. So we don't need a high volume of them.
Okay, now we are moving on to a really bold bicolor variety. And this one is Zowie Yellow Flame. And these have 2 to 3.5 inch blooms, 24 to 36 inches tall, 75 to 85 days to bloom. And this is another hybrid. So this is a more expensive seed. These have these really bright magenta orange sort of centers with these orangey yellow tips. It's a really bright, hot, fiery sort of color, right, Lisa?
And it is perfect for fall. I mean, this is right there it's very different than the queens, but this color palette really, really works well with fall colors. So yeah, it's perfect time of the year to plant it. The Zowie color is a zinnia that we typically would only plant at this time of the year. We wouldn't actually start that in the spring. That's just not a color that's really hot at that time of the year.
And how often do you tend to see single flowers with this variety?
I've had a real mixed bag with them, but the singles they're just so unique in their color that it just doesn't really seem to matter.
And are they about as productive as all the other zinnias?
No, I would say not in my experience. They aren't quite as productive as some of the others. And I will tell you that last year we had the best Zowie year we've ever had. I mean, they were 36 inches tall and larger blooms, So, I think that they just need a little bit more attention to watering and good high quality compost stock, soil, and they do really, really well. So not quite as productive.
And then how about disease resistance for these?
Yes, I didn't look at them yesterday, but yes, so they definitely are mildew resistant, but as all others, they will fall victim.
Yes. And do these just fall into that same 5% of the novelties? So
Yeah.
maybe 1% of these you would plant?
Yes.
All right, moving on to the last variety, and this is just a giant cactus mix. These have really large blooms, but they're unique because they are these spidery sort of quilled petals. So they're 3 to 6 inches across, 36 inches tall, 75 to 90 days to bloom, and these are open pollinated. So what do you like about the giant cactus zinnias, Lisa?
If you're listening to this and not watching it, you have got to go look. You have to go to YouTube because this image of those cactus blooms laying on the ground, it is that blush color on the top between the orange and the pink that is just beautiful. And there's another you can see in the lower picture next to the logo. There's even a more muted blush color, and then there's an ivory. So there's colors in here you just don't see. So customers, meaning commercial customers, either love it or they hate them. They either think they look like the most beautiful textured, gorgeous bloom they've ever seen, or they think it looks like an old aged flower.
Yeah.
And so I really think it depends on, you have to learn the correct stage to cut them. I think for farmers market, that's the way to find out, and we have 2 commercial customers that would use them. So it's all about how they grow and how you cut them, but I love them.
So there's also another variety called Inca Orange. Would you be likely to grow the mix and Inca for fall?
Yes, I would definitely grow the mix and Inca. Inca are all orange, which, that is such a great fall color, and it happens to be my favorite color. And so they're just all orange. But you could get away with just growing the mix because it also has a couple of shades. There's 3 shades of orange looking at us on this slide right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely a fall choice.
And how about singles versus doubles or semi-doubles with these giant cactus zinnias?
There are definitely some singles, but they're so interesting because their petals are frilly, that it just
Right.
makes them not quite as single looking,
Right. It looks like they're supposed to look like that.
Exactly.
And do these plants tend to be as productive as your Benary's giants?
No, and they are more mildew. They're more susceptible, I would say.
All right. And would your plantings of these be around 1% of your total zinnia plantings again?
Yeah, so actually the 5 others that you have listed here that are not Benaries are the ones that we grow some of, and we do them, we do in succession. And because we want to have them, we just don't need the volume. They aren't as versatile.
And one more question, just in general, what is the powdery mildew pressure like for these zinnias that are going into fall? How does it compare to other times of the year?
Yeah, I think the conditions are really pretty perfect for helping powdery mildew happen in the fall. Heavy dew, cooler temperatures at night. Anything you do to stress a plant makes it more susceptible. And as those conditions kind of start happening with fall, it can happen. So just kind of expect that. And, we do not fertilize zinnias in the garden once they're planted into a prepared spot that has had dry organic fertilizer added. We don't do any fertilizing after that, just to help to not contribute to fueling powdery mildew.
Well, that does it for this episode about zinnias today. I hope you'll consider giving zinnias for fall a try. Remember to subscribe or follow, and we always appreciate you leaving ratings or reviews in a podcast app and likes and comments over on YouTube. We love talking with you and hearing what you have to say.
And friends, if you want to learn more about what Layne and I do in all these areas of the Gardener's Workshop, drop on over to our website. Thanks, friends, for joining us. And until we meet again, ciao.
Bye.